Hi, so we are here today with Jeff Perlman, founder of Revenue Ninja. He was a CEO of OneSaas, which has been recently acquired by Intuit. Congratulations, Jeff, for such an amazing outcome
Thanks,
for
Raj.
such a big deal. I mean, Intuit is a big company, and you must be really happy.
Yeah, it was an outcome that it was a meeting of awesome conditions and the right strategy and great alignment.
Great, great, great. So, for those who don't know about OneSaaS, can you tell us and elaborate a bit, like what does OneSaaS do?
Yeah, so OneSaas is an integrations platform. It's a hub and spoke to basically bring all data in that you use to run a commerce business and keep it in sync. We used to say when a sale happens, everything that needs to happen after the sale, we're going to try to automate. So
Awesome.
that includes your accounting data, your fulfillment, your marketing communications, your inventory.
Okay, great, great, great. So, Jeff, so I and Jeff worked together back in 2011 in Reed, and we worked together as well in OneSaaS in 2019. So, Jeff, Reed was a big corporate, and before that, you were working with Visa. So, what made you join OneSaaS, which was a very small startup, I think, at that point in time?
Yep. Great. So when I was at Visa, I was actually running a startup. Myself and
Okay.
two other awesome people at Visa formed a new division of Visa in Asia Pacific called Strategic Innovations, and we basically took the charge to create projects, R&D projects that would allow Visa to explore areas that it wouldn't do normally quite so overtly as part of its core product strategy. And I primarily focus on something that ended up being called Pay Click by Visa, which was a virtual payment platform akin to PayMate and PayPal and other other
Okay.
payment Google Payments, etc. And a lot of the R&D and the learnings from that fed into some of the current Visa products like around Visa Wallet and things like that.
Awesome. So you always wanted to work for a startup. It was just coming along the way. It was building up
Yeah,
that entrepreneurial instinct.
there's an interest, when you run a startup within a big giant corporate like Visa, you have a huge safety net in that you're doing all the things that you do in a startup, but you have this big safety net of knowing that you're getting paid a full salary and that
Yeah.
if it doesn't work, you'll fall into another role at the company. And so all the perceived risk is kind of very faded off into the background.
Right.
Um, the nice thing is I worked with amazing teams of people between both Visa and Microsoft, which provided the development team that actually developed the product that I worked on. And it was those people that actually formed the foundation team of OneSaas. And when you start a new business and you already know your team and you know what they're capable of, you enter into it with a lot more confidence than when you try to build a team from scratch, with more unknowns. And it was an
Right.
exciting time. It was a good opportunity for me to finally go fully into startup land instead of being kind of in the corporate umbrella startup land.
Right. So can we assume that you already knew that it'll become that big, or you it really struggled a lot initially? Can you elaborate on that? That what
Yeah.
was your journey to make it so it's become so big and acquired by Intuit? So when you started off, what you faced and what were I'm aware of a little bit of those, but not that much. So for everyone who's a budding entrepreneur, I would really, and for myself as well, I would really like to know how you overcame,
Yeah.
those
I think
struggles.
I can talk about my own experience, and I think it's true for a lot of entrepreneurs. You start off with an immense amount of passion and confidence that your idea is valid, that it has the right product market fit, that it's going to be adopted and build and grow and be big, be huge. Everybody starts out with a vision, but what you lack in the early days is data and proof points. So you start with a lot of hypotheticals and theories, and you build your business based on those hypotheticals, and that's what we did. We had a
Right.
lot of hypotheticals. We got a lot right. We got a lot wrong. We went through phases where our confidence was challenged excessively. We
Okay.
went through the deep dark chasms of oh my god. Um, but we had survivability, and that we genuinely believed that we had that strong foundation. And as long as we could survive those dark points, those dips in the path, those confidence challengers, we genuinely believed that we had the upside was always there and that we would get there, and we persevered. and move between survival and thriving at the right times in the business. And that was, I think, one of our great skills is identifying when it was important to tip the balance between survival versus thriving. Because
Nice.
sometimes the challenge exists that you just know, if we have to face this challenge, we have to ride this out for 6 to 9 months and survive it,
Right.
and then we can rebuild. There is no flip a switch and immediately go into thriving mode again when something big hits you.
Right. Right.
And we
Right.
were very quick and thoughtful in the way we responded to those survival challenges, and that was a big part of our success.
Great. Great. Would it be a correct assumption? So I joined OneSaas as a head of product, and the team was amazingly passionate. Like I've never worked with such passionate group of people who are ready to do whatever it takes, and whatever it takes to achieve the goal. Like so aligned with the vision of the company. So would it be also a correct assumption that you had such an amazing, passionate, team with OneSaas? In fact, like there were people who were there right from the start, and they were there.
Yeah, I mean, what one we operated with absolute transparency. We never tried to have that separation of the secret things going on in the amongst the directors versus what we tell the employees. We were absolutely transparent with the good, the bad, and the ugly, and brought everybody along on that journey and brought everybody along on the decision making as well. So we made sure that people were on board with the challenges we faced and the successes that we won, and everybody had a part of that. And that was also a big part of the way we hired. There was red flags and green flags when we interviewed people as far as are they the right fit for a company that has the kind of culture you just described. Examples being, if in the first interview a person was focused on, well, my market rate is this, and I think that I should be making this much salary, and this is how much I demand. That wasn't the type of people we hired. We had people that could have been making 50 to 100% more than they were making salary wise at OneSaas because they believed in the long term outcome that they all received by
Right.
staying with us that long. And we had incredibly low turnover. The vast majority of our turnover was by our choice. I think in our entire 10 years, we only had 3 people ever resign.
Wow. Wow. And that's an amazing learning for, all the entrepreneurs. Again, it's a long journey. It's not like 1 year, 2 years, and you flip it. So when you are creating a startup, I think one thing to remember definitely is hire the right people, hire the right, who are passionate about entrepreneurship. And one I think one of the things which Jeff emphasized was be transparent,
Yeah.
and then only everyone will be aligned with the vision.
And
Great.
on the hire the right people thing, one of the things that was really critical to the way we approach hiring as well, that we learned the hard way sometimes. Hire talented people that are at the top of their game, even though they're more expensive.
Okay.
If you hire somebody who's not at the top of their game, who's not as competent, you're throwing money away. You spend 40% more for a really talented person, and you get 20 times the output. It
Okay.
makes such a huge difference to hire the right people who genuinely can align with what you need, but also really operate at that high level, that high standard level that you saw at OneSaas.
Great, great, great. So I'll take it as a compliment, right?
Yeah,
I was a part of
absolutely.
OneSaas as well.
We did the dance for years to try to find the right timing to bring you into the company, and it really just was a prioritization of when it was the right time to distribute some of the hats that were on my head and Paolo and Francois and Cornelia's heads to bring in a full-time role that would be at your level.
Right. Great. Great. I loved working with OneSaas. It'll be there. One of the best companies I've worked with. One of the best teams I would say I've worked with ever. I would say in my
Yeah.
experience. So great. Uh, so I'm just curious, Jeff. So was a potential exit always there in mind right from the start, or you were just tracking along the way, going with the flow?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, we always strove to build a good business, a great business, and build all the right things to drive a business, drive the success of the business. But we always kept an eye on where does this business ultimately sit in an ecosystem that will, we genuinely believed it would consolidate at some point in time. And
Okay.
we genuinely believed that what we were doing was strategically critical to a lot of the organizations we partnered with. And it's easy to say in foresight, but I believe we actually had that foresight to say we know that we're critically strategic enough that when this hits the right timing in the market,
Right.
we're going to be a big acquisition target, and that's exactly what played out. It took a lot
Right.
longer for the world to catch up with us and to be where we were. And we were probably a bit too early to market in our very early days, but the path we followed and the path we ended up with didn't depart greatly from the strategy and direction we set and reset and revisited every year to make sure we were on the right track.
Yeah. I mean, I remember, and that's what I do product management coaching. So one of the first thing I coach or I mentor or I convey is, so whenever you join a company as a product person, you need to be aligned with the business vision and strategy. And your product vision or product strategy or roadmap or features cannot be misaligned with the strategy. And one of the things I remember in one of the conversations in OneSaas was that your competitors were customizing a lot in regards to integrations with different partners, and OneSaas has a clear focus that they have a baseline which they will not digress from a lot, which I really appreciated. So is it true, Jeff? I mean, that was
Yeah,
again.
we had a lot of competitors come into our space in the SMB and lower middle market space who rapidly discovered that there was really big enterprise opportunities as their product got more sophisticated and they layered services like consulting services and et cetera on top of those. And they moved up into the enterprise space. And we consciously made the decision to hold firm in that SMB and lower middle market space. And that was a big decision. We did not have the financial growth and success that some of those companies had, MuleSoft being an example. People like that. Trying to think of some other examples.
Zapier.
My mind's been out of the business for enough time that I started to forget who these guys were. But we held firm in the SMB space, and we always had competitors, but our competitors stayed pretty thin because they always saw that bigger opportunity going up into enterprise space. And we really believed that the SMB space needed to have the service we were providing and that we could be the best at providing it. And I
Right.
believe by the time we exited it, that we were perceived in the industry as top of the game in that space.
Amazing, amazing. This is one of the examples I always give, by the way, of aligning the products and strategy with the business vision. So this exit has happened, Jeff, and you have achieved an amazing outcome. So what would be that one suggestion you want to give to the budding entrepreneurs
I
who are
think I'd go
building a
back.
SaaS? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to what I said originally. Finding the balance between surviving and thriving is really critical, and knowing when it's important to thrive and when it's important to survive. And years ago, I remember having a conversation with somebody similar to this one, where we talked about the job at the top. The CEO job is about having all your radars on all the time, and not definitely always doing things, but being aware of everything so you can recognize that opportunity, that alignment of multiple things that creates the moment to jump in and push for that thriving growth and scaling opportunity, and recognizing when it was best to put all the defenses up and make sure that you survived a period that was going to be challenging.
Right.
And having that vision from that radar, and that radar really is about data and listening. And
Right.
I think that, it's not listening in a one-to-one standpoint, it's listening to the market, paying
Hmm.
attention to what's going on out there, listening to your partners that are important to your survival, and listening to what they're really saying. A lot of times in partnerships and sales, you have a tendency to focus on what you're trying to sell and trying to get them on board with you. And I think it was really important that we spent a lot of time listening to what our partner was saying, what they really needed, and
Hmm.
recognizing that a lot of times what our partners really wanted or needed was the depth of talent and capability that we had, but they really wanted it in-house, but didn't have it. And that's
Yeah.
why they were partnering with us. So it was almost, in a lot of our partnerships, they were really happy partnerships, but we were their second option because they weren't able to do it in-house,
Right.
which kind of fed back to our belief that at some point, as these organizations got big enough and this became strategically critical enough, that we were going to be an acquisition target for many of these organizations.
Amazing. Amazing. Um, this is one of the questions I think every entrepreneur will relate to. The darkest time. I was listening to an interview of the Airbnb founder, and they talked about 6 months. There was absolutely no revenue, and they shifted to bread and breakfast, and they actually created muesli or something on those lines to survive. And that was the first revenue generation, which was $30,000. So coming from that thought process or question, uh, so Jeff, what was the darkest time for OneSAS, and how did you came out of it?
Yeah, so we had our darkest time was probably very early on, in like 2 to 3 years into the business, when we just weren't getting where we wanted to get, where we thought we needed to get fast enough. We were struggling to get the right level of credibility with partners and get the right partnerships in place, and we hadn't quite gotten our big holistic product market fit. We had a product market fit at a one-to-one with the small businesses, but we needed a broader recognition in the market that we were doing the right things and that we were aligned with what the businesses that we worked with, the other applications we worked with, needed. And we had a couple of partnerships go sour. We spent a lot of investment into those that didn't produce the way we
Yeah.
wanted to, and we hit a point where we had gone 19 months without paying ourselves, as in
Wow.
the two founders. I had to sell my house, and I made a conscious decision, despite having job opportunities where I could have left OneSaas and gone and worked full time and kept my house. I made a conscious decision. No, I still believe that we've got the right thing, and we have the corner to turn. And selling my house was the right thing because it allowed me to extend my own personal runway and support OneSaas a lot longer. And that's a talk about a low and dark decision, one that you have to bring your whole family on board with, because I couldn't make that decision on my own. My wife needed to be on board, my kids needed to be on board, and they were, they were awesome. They supported the decision all the way, and they believed in it. Um,
Incredible.
and like I said, timing is right. When you keep your eyes open to recognize those right opportunities, we were able, through one of our partners at that time, to identify one of their partners that was struggling with something that we could address, and we created a perfect storm within months of that all happening. Actually, in the middle of, I already had gone too far down selling my house and too late to pull out. We landed a massive global contract with a global telco, that ended up
Wow.
only lasting for about 2 years.
Mhm.
That we kind of knew that it was going to have some problems, but it paid really well because it paid really well, and we kind of took it as a lifesaver that could create a lot of opportunity for us, at the same time that we saw a lot of risk in where it fit into their strategy, and it
Right.
turned us around. And we went from being in a 80 square meter office with 9 people crammed into it, to a beautiful office, and extending our team out to almost 30 people, and we're able to use that as a springboard to launch the version 2 of our product, which
Hmm.
was really going from that first raw MVP, not great user experience product, to something that brought in a lot of the data and learnings that we had learned from that first round, to
Hmm.
make something that was a lot more acceptable to the market, a lot more usable, a lot more user friendly, and that became the stepping stone to continue to use that consumer feedback, the customer feedback loop, along with data points, to to inform the direction of the product and the business going forward.
Right, right. It's inspiring, Jeff. Like when there's so much of passion, I can actually see through, and I can really I'm actually getting goosebumps thinking about selling my own house. So I can, yeah, I mean, what sort of a passion and belief, I would say, or certainty, the founders had for OneSaaS, it truly deserves the outcome which it has achieved. Definitely. So going back to 2019, when I came, when I got this opportunity to work with you again as a head of product with OneSaaS. Um, so I came in with a product first mindset, and with a sheer focus on looking at the product management process and optimizing it. And you would have seen me, a lot of kind of shaking up, meeting people, understanding the pain points, and doing a bit of maybe radical proposals to you, which thanks to you, which were approved. So what do you think was the biggest benefit of my contribution, I would say, though it was very little, uh,
Oh,
unfortunately.
it was shorter in time than we would have liked because we changed direction, but it was awesome. And like I said earlier, it became a point where we felt we had both the um, financial stability and the need for me to take one of those hats off. And we had a shared role between product management and project management, and overall guidance of that development team that needed to be looked after in a more dedicated way. You were, as you know, because we had talked multiple times over the years about finding that right moment in time, and our timings never quite coincided.
Yeah.
And this particular time, our timings coincided perfectly, and it was awesome that we were able to bring you on board. And one of the things I thought was awesome about the way you came on board is you came on board with some very clear ideas, as to how you wanted to do things, but you didn't come on board to impose those. You came on board to listen to how we were currently doing things and find that way to adapt the best things of our organization to what you knew you could bring in to improve that and make it better.
Right.
And that's
Right.
that's your first 3 months was doing an amazing amount of listening and adapting your vision to fit our team and our approach to things.
Right, right, right. And that's what I actually always, I'm a big pro on. I'm very passionate about product management. So need to listen, need to understand the vision first, need to understand the strategy first so that you're not coming up with product ideas which are completely misaligned. In your case,
But
in
that's my
particular,
job, man.
yeah. I completely understand that. So it's not like I'm coming up with, oh, Jeff, let's do some customization. You're like, Raj, we have a different strategy. So it's very important for any product person to understand and be completely aligned with the business vision and strategy. So I'm glad I could contribute in that regard. So the other thing I just wanted to bring up, again, it's been more than a decade now. In 2000, I think 11, we worked together, and you were, I think, heading marketing in Reed, and I think I, along with Ant, were the two product guys working our way through. So we were going by the books in regards to problem identification and validation and solution and testing the hypothesis. We had a big MVT team as well to test and learn. Um, but together, as far as I remember, I mean, we were the ones together with marketing to launch the uh, first different or a unique revenue generating product, because Hotfog was sustaining on Google Ads essentially, and I
Yeah.
think we looked through it and looked past it and looked at the problems or the pain points which small businesses were facing, essentially in regards to visibility at that point in time. Now, obviously, the world has changed, but what are your thoughts about that product first approach or the product led thinking, which kind of were spearheaded by us as a product team, being the only product team, which obviously grew to 8 product managers and became a bigger team, but initial days, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the awesome challenge of Hot Frog was when we all joined, because we all joined not too far away from each other timing
Yeah.
wise, is that we joined an organization that essentially was spamming the Google search engine in order
Yes.
to generate what I would call, and you would probably agree, fairly fake ad revenue.
Yep.
Tricking people into clicking ads in order to make ad revenue. And that was the entire product. The great thing about it was the most intense, sophisticated business of multivariant testing I've ever seen or heard of in my life,
Yes.
running multiple multivariant tests every single day to tweak and tweak and tweak and tweak and tweak and tweak, with some of them producing immensely surprising results financially from
Yes.
tiny little things like changing the hex code of a color on a link and things like that. And having that foundation, you guys were able to use that capability to really drive an amazing engagement product, because what we were all challenged with was, hey, let's try to actually engage the fake users, the businesses that are listed on this product. Let's try to actually get them to own their
Yes.
listing, become engaged, see
Yes.
a value proposition, and engage in that value proposition. And to be able to do that with that intense multivariant testing capability was an amazing combination that allows you guys to iterate and iterate and iterate and really deliver something that had an awesome user experience and started to produce that level of engagement and value proposition and ultimately revenue that we wanted to see from the business.
Right. I mean, you've touched upon one of the, I would say, one of the aspects of product management, which I'm really completely aligned with. Uh, the multivariant testing team, which you referred to, I think that was one of the greatest learnings I've ever received firsthand from any company. And from then on, whichever company I've consulted in, the very first thing I do is gauge whether they have a test and learn stream or not, and
Yep.
then have a framework for them wherein, and I call it experiments framework, wherein what problems, what's your problem statement to launch that experiment, what hypothesis you're trying to achieve or prove, um, uh, what's your key success metrics, what's your secondary success metrics, and then try to optimize And the jarring fact is that a lot of companies don't understand the importance of that. Like firsthand, I have kind of introduced that there is something called experimentation, which you refer
Yep.
to as multivariate testing as well. I mean, people refer to that now. Obviously, there are so many tools to do A/B testing. That's called A/B testing as well. And apparently, companies for which the funnel, and obviously from a marketing background, Jeff, you would totally relate to it. That for companies which have this funnel as their bread and butter, I would say, there is absolutely no optimization, no experiments happening to increase the conversion rate or reduce the drop offs.
Yeah, and,
So,
and if there is, it's not flexible enough to allow them to do it in a timely enough manner to allow them to carve a strategic path through that. That
yes,
testing happens like on a cadence of every 2 to 3 months.
yes,
And at Hot Frog, it was happening. At Reed, it was happening 2 to 3 times a day.
a day.
And I've never yet seen any business that's done it to the extent of flexibility and learning and adaptability and success that that company did.
Yeah,
But like you, I've taken that with me and used that mentality to drive that need to have that flexibility, to be able to do that kind of ongoing, constant focus on improving and optimization,
right, right, right.
and
And
never being satisfied that you've gotten there because the world around you changes.
yeah,
So you have to then readapt to those changes constantly and be aware of those changes coming and prepare for them.
yeah. No, exactly right, exactly right. I mean, timing is definitely one thing. The other thing also is that, so I've worked in right from insurance to real estate to health, wealth, industrials, multi-domain, and in every domain, what's the one thing which is applicable is the risk mitigation, which is you think about a feature and you're really, really very confident as a product gut feel, you can say, or a founder, so to speak. But you cannot launch it because it'll be exposed to all of your audience and the business might fall flat on face. And that's where the only way out is one, like you mentioned, rapid testing. The other bit is you can do a lot of throttling. So you can expose it to only 5% of the users and see what the result is. Increase it to 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, and then 100%, and then expose it. So it's a tough ask
Yeah.
to explain it and introduce it. But then every single business I have introduced it either as a consultant or as a full time product guy in that company. Everyone has reaped a lot of benefits because of that. So it's great you touched on the topic of multivariate testing. I remember though, again, I mean, to be very honest, I've not seen a company who has like, I don't know, maybe 8 to 10 developers only focused on multivariate testing built in house.
Yeah, and that's one of the cool things about being a startup in Australia or working in Australia, period, is that testing and that risk taking is something that is really a lot easier to take and to stomach when you're a startup. Big companies struggle with that because that's carries a lot broader risk and a lot deeper risk. But Australia has always been seen as a market that mirrors many of the bigger markets, but is
Yeah,
isolated enough to do that testing in. So one of the cool
right.
things, having worked for Reed and Visa and a big ad agency before that, is that I was in Australia doing that, where we were taking a lot of the risks that the rest of the world in those organizations couldn't afford to take, and we were
Right.
doing that R&D, that risk taking it through R&D to inform the greater organization in a way that the greater organization just could never do in the continental United States or across Europe.
Right, right. Oh, completely agree. 30 million versus 330 million, as they say in the Amazon world.
Yeah,
So, yeah, yeah, it's a small market. I can completely agree. There are some tools wherein if whoever would be doing Amazon selling, they would be able to relate to it. Um,
yeah.
uh,
Well, I remember even
there are a lot of tools which are not even launched in Australia, like Jungle Scout. If you want to actually assess how Amazon buyers or sellers are, the tool doesn't support Australia because there's not enough traffic.
yeah, well, even small like New Zealand. I moved to New Zealand originally in the mid '90s, and experienced my first VoIP system, a digital phone system in an office, because New Zealand had leapfrogged in telephony technology because global telecoms were using New Zealand as a test bed to see, can this stuff actually work. And there was some
Right.
amazing technology leaps happening there especially in the telephony and ultimately internet and VoIP, et cetera, industries that, yeah, were unheard of anywhere else in the world at the time.
So we are
It's
lucky, right?
what's that?
We are lucky that we
Yeah,
have that leverage of experimentation.
exactly. And it's a good mentality to have in this part of the world as well.
Oh, great, 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 great. So, Jeff, just wanted to ask. I mean, we did talk about. It's a bit of digression, but then we did talk about, um, meditation at certain points and how you kind of. Again, I mean, where I'm coming from is. It's a tough job. I mean, you handle an acquisition, for example. You went through your initial struggles. So what's that thing which made you going, apart from the passion? Yes, definitely, and you already knew that this has what it takes to become a successful startup. But how did you so like just wanted to your daily routine, what makes you stick around, what do you do, how you manage your life and you balance out,
Yep.
like you mentioned about your family being there with you. They would be definitely whinging at points wherein you were 24 cross 7 engrossed.
No.
So how do you just yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things you would have seen joining OneSaas is that we had a strong health and wellness um, stream in the business. No matter how busy we were, you put appointments on your calendar for your gym session. You put appointments on your
Yes.
calendar for the team to go play soccer together. You put appointments on your calendar, and it's sacrilegious to violate those. It had to be a critical incident for us not to do those, even when we were really busy, because
Right.
that stepping away and changing your mind's focus and getting into a physical activity, getting into something else was so important to being able to come back with a fresh head and solve things better and be more productive in the time that you spent in the office. And
Right.
that's, one of the things that I think is horrible about the startup industry is what you were just describing, that working 60, 70 hours a week.
Yep.
It's not productive. There's so many studies out there showing that working that kind of time is not productive. You're a lot more productive working 40 or 50 hours a week with good breaks that reset your head so that time is more productive rather than time itself being a gauge of productivity. You can get a
Right.
lot more done when you're really healthy in the mind and focused in a day than you can get done in a week when you've been working 70-hour weeks and are exhausted and burnt out.
Yeah.
And we were really
Yeah.
conscious of preventing that burnout and finding that, we were a dedicated, hardworking team, but we were also, cliche to say work hard, play hard, but we made a point of making sure that people had downtime and that people didn't overextend themselves into
Right.
their work commitments.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I mean, again, coaching, consulting, or whatever. I mean, one of the things is, um, so there's a question which is often asked that, oh, how we'll be able to cover this big of a learning in 1 hour coaching sessions. And one of the things I always convey is that because we'll be outcome focused, like
Yep.
you mentioned. So it's not the number of hours 70, 80, 100. It's more about if you have the razor focus on what outcome you're trying to create or achieve, then you will yourself uh, you know um, feel different and have a different level of energy because you know that you have this limited time and you have to achieve this outcome at the end. It's
Yep.
not you're doing it because you want to spend these many hours. So it's, again, I mean, it's a combination of working hard, smart, and being focused.
Yeah, and
uh,
it's a challenge in the consulting industry because traditionally consulting is an hourly rate based business. And I hate hourly rate based businesses because
okay.
it says that your time has value, not what you do with that time.
Right.
And it leads to with a lot of consultants, it leads to bad behavior and stretching the time out and filling the time and doing things like that. When reality is, I want to be paid for an outcome.
Yes.
I want to achieve an outcome. Even at OneSaas, we avoided the trap, what I see as a trap in employee share schemes, which is vesting on annual anniversary dates. Oh, here's your share allocation. It'll vest 25% every year for 4 years. Well, my only incentive there is to survive for 4 years. There's no incentive to thrive.
Right.
The thriving is, oh, and I want to make those shares worth a lot, so I want to contribute well to the company, but it's kind of secondary. So
Right.
our employee share scheme, as you would have seen, was the opposite. We
Right.
set KPIs, we set outcomes for the company,
Right.
and we said whether it takes us 2 months or 2 years to achieve each outcome, we will have vesting events at each of those outcomes. And that's the way we manage things. And that means the behavior is driven towards one common set of KPIs and deliverables. Everything was focused on thriving to reach those goals, not on surviving to make it another year.
Right.
And that's an important mentality I think that every startup should take on with their employees to make sure that they're driving the right behavior with the right motivations.
And I think if you are outcome focused, and I'm talking like with a product management hat on, uh, it's all about the strategic direction. It's all about, are you solving a real world problem? Are you creating value for the business? And I think it has really given me, again, I mean, Reed. So I got like 4 promotions in 6 years because I was only and only focused on creating value for
Yep.
the business. If you take that approach of thriving and sustaining and just going along with the flow, and you're not creating value, like you correctly mentioned, for uh, even the companies you're consulting, for example, or in any, even you're a full-time job or contractor, if you're not creating value, you'll only reach that far. You'll never be able to achieve that accelerated growth.
Yep.
So it's kind of very well aligned.
Hasn't
Thanks for.
hasn't the pandemic been great in retraining major employers, big companies, in how to manage employee productivity because they lost the ability to track when the employee was punching in and punching out of the time clock. And because everybody's working remotely, it was more focused on, are they still getting their jobs done? And the reality is, a lot of big companies, the job you have to get done can get done in about 1 out of the 5 days a week because the other 4 days are spent looking like you're getting the job done.
Right,
And
right.
the productivity improvement in companies that actually understood, hey, if I just trust these people and treat them like adults and focus on what they actually do instead of the time they spend, I actually created a better company that I've learned by accident through remote working. And that's been amazing.
Wow, wow. So Jeff, since OneSaas, I think you're still a little bit in touch, but then,
I'm
uh,
done.
okay, you're done. So what's the next thing then? So obviously, I know that you'll not be, sitting across the beach and just relaxing. So just wanted to know that, what's the next thing? What's the next big thing you're planning to create?
Yeah, sitting on the beach and just relaxing.
That's a good thing to do, actually.
No, I mean, it's important. Like, I am enjoying some downtime. The first thing I
Nice,
said as my goal when I wrapped up was I need to breathe and I need to sleep. And that's been important. And I'm starting to breathe and sleep again. That's pretty
nice.
critical. It's a stressful process to go through an acquisition. It's not just a smooth and happy ride down the hill.
Right,
So that's been important. But I'm really focused on, I focus on getting a lot of feedback from people like yourself and people I've worked with, what they saw as my value contributions and my top skills and what I could contribute. And I've also been involved in things like the Founders Institute and mentoring other startups through things like that. And that really led me to what I've am in the very early stages of getting off the ground, which is Revenue Ninja,
nice,
which is essentially recognizing that there's this new role that's evolved and kind of melded into multiple different shapes over the past 10 years called a chief revenue officer, which from my view is really the person who's looking after all aspects of go to market to make sure that you're optimizing the productivity, efficiency, and
Mhm.
ultimately the revenue and profitability output of a business
Right,
and formulating a go to market strategy around that that's very strongly data informed with constant data plus intuition equals hypothesis equals learning equals data plus intuition equals and it's instilling that kind of mentality and process in the startups I'm mentoring, but also giving them some of the tools and processes that I've learned the hard way over the years to help them get a bit of a jump start on some of that is what I'm really focusing on doing. So I don't want to. I'm not looking to become chief revenue officer of an Amazon. I'm
hmm,
looking to become a outsourced chief revenue officer influencer into the startup community to help startups get a leg up on something that they often ignore early on, which is how do I price my product right? How do I optimize my revenue? How do I understand my unit economics and make sure that I'm making a good profit margin? How do I make sure that the way I'm addressing things is not leaving money on the table with my customers and that I'm maximizing the revenue potential of the people I've already engaged? How do I get on a growth track that makes sure that I'm not just recording revenue, but I'm actually making profits off that revenue and can become less dependent on the need to do another round of investing
right,
and more able to use my revenue for self-sustenance and look at investors and investment as something to help me scale rather than help me survive. So
right,
investment, turning that investment focus to investment when I really need to scale rather than investment to help me survive.
right,
And that aligns a lot better with, outside of the angel community, which takes big bets on hypotheses and early proof
right.
points. the vast majority of VCs are looking for something that they believe is already showing signs of being able to grow and ultimately scale.
Right.
So the earlier on in your track you get your business showing those signs and showing those proof points and being self-sustainable, the actual better position you're putting in for the investment, but the less dependency you have on needing that investment. And
Right.
getting rid of that dependency, which can come across sometimes as desperation,
Hmm.
puts you in a much better position to go out and seek investment when you feel you need it for your business and get the right kind of relationship built with the VCs that you bring into the business.
Right. Amazing, amazing, Jeff. I can only already see that you're really, really solving a big problem with a lot of SaaS founders I know about. They struggle with the pricing, for example. The other bit which you touched upon was investment, right? So when you go for investments and early on or multiple rounds, you lose a lot of equity, which was your own, right? So what can be better than generating a revenue which can sustain you for long, so that you can build a business, wherein like the outcome which once has received, for example, where either it gets acquired with such a big company, or even when the investment comes in, you only need to part away with a much smaller percentage.
Yeah, and ultimately understanding what your long-term strategy is, whether it's an exit strategy or an IPO
Yeah.
strategy or a build a self-sustaining independent business strategy, where your priority focus is. Sometimes ultimate growth and scalability isn't your best
Yeah.
friend. You can be growing and scaling at a point where you price yourself out of the market for the acquisitions that are most likely for your business. You
Right.
become you cross that line of becoming too expensive and being a lot more costly a direction than the opportunity loss or opportunity cost of a company just saying, oh, we just build this ourselves. It's too expensive to acquire. It doesn't make sense on paper. So finding that right sweet spot, finding that right target, knowing where you're heading and where's the healthy place to be for the
Right.
exit you want is important.
Amazing, amazing. It'll be of a great help to a lot of founders out there. So here's Jeff, freed up from OneSaas, coming your way.
But
That's great. That's great.
and to
So,
our discussion, I'm very focused, especially nobody has the financials to
hmm,
afford a chief revenue officer or to afford to pay consultants. So I'm
yes,
approaching this market as I want a piece of success,
right,
and I only want to succeed myself through those engagements if I can directly connect the value contribution I've made to that success. So I'm really focused on that. If we don't get good outcomes, then we don't get good outcomes, including myself.
amazing.
It's got to be a shared risk, shared reward path.
No, that's really great. That's really great. So the startup community there's great help coming in, especially this niche. I've not heard that much. So Jeff, it'll be of, I think, um, uh, like for example, there's a lot of SaaS founders which often come and and totally agree. I mean, it's a very big cost for them to again, the guys coming from pure finance focus, we know they're very expensive. Even the consulting is very expensive, right? So if someone can give them the right mentorship and right direction, and like you mentioned that you succeed together, who is a part of the growth, I mean, there'll be more alignment and think much more wins, I would say.
I hope so. Check back with
Sure.
me in a year, see how I'm doing.
We'll be together a lot more frequently, talking to each other, uh, sharing our new journeys, I think, or direction which we have taken. So Jeff, a quick rapid fire, right? So what sort of morning ritual you do to keep you balanced?
Yeah. No, great question because everybody talks about their morning rituals. Because I'm working from Australia, but with a lot of companies based in the US, when I wake up, it's middle of the day there already.
Okay.
Um, I don't want to wake up and jump right into work, but I also
Hmm.
can't afford not to check if there's anything critical or urgent happening that needs me to jump into work.
Hmm.
So my morning ritual has been pretty standard. The first thing I do is get on and check, is anything happening that needs my attention right now? So I do a morning triage. First
Right.
thing I do, I have my coffee, do a quick morning triage, 5 minutes. Just, is anything happening that needs my attention now? Great. No. Next step is go do my personal thing, which
Right.
is go to the gym, go do yoga, go down to the beach for a swim, whatever it might be. But that, and I'm an early riser as well, so I'm up by
Nice.
5:30 or 6 every morning. I've done my triage by 6. I've had my coffee. That gives me 6:30 to kind of 8 to go do my thing,
Right. Right. Right.
and going and doing my thing and carving out that space and making sure that that's treated as religious unless something critical is happening that I have to jump into, was really important to making sure I set my mind right for the day and came
Right.
into it already in the right kind of positive mindset, energized, ready to go. And sometimes I waited, and because I knew I had stuff I had to do early in the morning. Sometimes that morning ritual didn't take place until 10:30 or 11, but
Mhm.
it still happened. It was
Right.
extremely rare during OneSaas, no matter how busy we were, that I had to say, geez, I'm just not going to be able to go do my boxing class today. And actually, when things were really stressful and really intense and I was really needed, boxing class was one of my fallbacks. Going and punching a bag for an hour, man, did I come back to the office with a lot of the negative side of stress gone, so I could really be positive and focus on helping the right way
Right.
with whatever the situation was.
Amazing. Amazing. Okay.
Better to punch a bag than to punch my coworkers.
Yeah, we didn't sit together, thankfully. Okay. All
I
right.
never actually punched a coworker.
Yeah, I think that's why you were there across the corner, right? There was a kitchen in between, and then.
Yeah, yeah. Keep Jeff at arm's length. Yeah.
All right. So another question, which is a bit unique. So, what do people never ask you that you wish they did?
Um, I think a lot of startup founders are afraid to show that they're afraid. They're afraid to show their fear and their weakness because most of the people they interact with all day are people that they need to demonstrate confidence and strength to. And I do think that there's a real, I'll get into the mental health thing. There's a real mental health problem that is recognized, but still kind of shoveled to the side around founders, around how stressful it is and how isolated you can often feel.
Yeah.
And one of the things that people don't talk about enough, and that I make a point of talking to the founders that I work with and Founder Institute and people like that, is your mental health.
Hmm.
Making sure that you're okay. It's okay to be afraid. It's okay to have fear. It's okay to have weaknesses. It's okay to acknowledge those weaknesses. Not definitely with every audience you're talking to, but you need to find that outlet. You need to find that person, and I believe in peer mentoring a lot. That person who's kind of your equal, but in a removed situation that you're never going to do business with, that
Right.
you can talk to.
Right.
I have a good friend from way back in my visa days that he and I go on big giant bushwalks, and we talk nonstop on those bushwalks. And those are mutually therapeutic for each other's businesses. That will never, neither of our businesses will ever cross over with each other because they're in very different spaces. But we just talk things through, and we use each other as a sounding board, and that's been fantastic. And
Right.
you've got to have that peer mentoring capability, and even within the Sydney founders community, the entrepreneurs community, I was part of a peer mentoring group for the past 7 years, where it was a group of 5 to 8 people at a similar level in companies at similar stages. They would get together once a month under an NDA and openly, rawly share what was going on and get feedback and questions and interact with each other in a way that allowed you to go back saying, finally, somebody I could talk to about this. That was really helpful. And I can go back in tomorrow and I think I can address this problem that's been nutting around in my head a lot better because I've got some impartial feedback from people who I can trust.
Right.
And
Right.
I don't think people ask enough, who do you talk to when you really need to talk to somebody? That's to
Right.
go back to your question. Who do I talk to when I really need to talk to somebody and I feel very alone?
Right. Right. I completely relate to it, Jeff. It's empathy. You've touched upon a lot of uh, issues which a lot of employees are facing, and I think I wrote a post. I think maybe 5 months back when I was really shaken by the responses I was getting in my trust calls, wherein people come and talk about why they want to become a product manager, why they want my coaching, and whether I can help them or not. Um, and the issues, the frustration of not being able to contribute, uh, working in a job which is much lower than your capability, toxic political environments, whatnots. I mean, people just speak out, and then you're like sitting there absorbing. Um, and one of the questions I asked, they're pretty structured. The trust calls are to really get, aligned. Because if I become their coach, we need to be really, really aligned together in the journey. So one of the question I always ask is that for how long you are facing this frustration, or you wanted to take the next step, or this feeling was there. And Jeff, it's like 5 years, 10 years, in some cases, 15 years. So it's exactly what you mentioned, that if there's someone there to talk to you, it encourages you to take a pause and talk about it, reflect on yourself. Like you mentioned, I would relate to it when you say that you're doing bushwalking and talking to each other. It's like in some way talking to yourself as well, and you start getting solutions, right? And that's really really needed, which often people think about, but they just are so swayed away with the flow and the daily chores and the routines and sustainability, and then just keep on moving. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, amazing, Jeff. I
And those day-to-day frustrations that you talk about that last 5-10 years, talking to the right people helps each other understand the separation of what you have some control and influence over and what you don't, and allows you to stop focusing on and being frustrated by things that are completely beyond your control. Recognize where you can have influence and where you can gain control. That ultimately helps get rid of those
yes,
frustrating things.
right,
Focus on what you actually can do and what you can have an impact on.
right,
I think there's a huge tendency in this world to have, we are a world full of existential angst, to use the latest cliche, but all this anxiety caused by things that are beyond our capability to influence as little tiny people in this huge world, that impact our existence in a way that makes us, we're a depressed and anxious world right now.
right, right,
And recognizing, how can I actually get some control over that? How can I influence that? What little can I do? And even if that's one little thing, I'm on the bushwalk and I carry a plastic bag and I pick up a plastic bottle as I walk by it instead of leaving it there. Am I preventing plastic from going in the ocean? Yes, I am. One
yeah,
bottle. Is
yeah.
that enough? Yeah, I'm doing a little bit of something so I don't watch the news and go, how can there be so much crap in the ocean? Like, yeah, I'm doing my one little thing. Hope, if everybody did their one little thing, you start to have impact.
No, yeah, I mean, 100%, completely agree. It's it's one of the I would say major verticals, because if you look at, say, all right, Raj, you're doing product management coaching, so you must be upskilling people about and just kind of so that they can gain from your experience of product management. But then one of the biggest verticals is mindset,
Yep.
and the strength to break out of your cocoon, to strength the strength to do something which is out of your comfort zone lies within, actually, which you just curb. And like you mentioned, again, you're part of Founders Institute, and then you have been doing mentoring. You would have definitely observed that the solution is right there, but then you don't have the right direction, which you would have actually, when you would have mentored, you would have observed that the guy just needed the right direction, you know not being uh, uh,
And
in the
not even
random.
always directions. Sometimes they just need the right questions asked of them.
Yes,
A
yeah,
lot of the time when I talk to some of the founders coming through these programs, it's just asking them the questions that they're too close to what they do day to day to ask,
right,
getting them to confront those questions and realize, oh, yeah, I'm not asking myself the right questions.
right,
And
right,
and
right,
to your point, to back to like the plastic water bottle, the difference between an entrepreneur and a non-entrepreneur to me is looking at a problem and how far you take solving it.
hmm.
So think about the plastic bottle analogy. I see the problem. I pick up a plastic bottle when I'm walking. Am I really doing a lot to solve it? Not much, but I'm doing something.
It's a small
The
step.
next stage is the guy who says, I'm going to create this thing that goes out in the ocean, this robotic giant net thing, like these guys, these high school students or whatever from Norway have done, that goes out and collects these big giant garbage heaps and sweeps them in and removes them from the ocean. And then you've got, then what do I do with all that plastic? And then you have, the big shoe company saying, oh, we can actually process that and make shoes out of recycled ocean plastic. And the solution to the problem catches up to the size of the problem. And that's product management. Product management is ultimately how far can we go with our product or with products and the features of those products to solve a problem that initially seems too big for us.
Right, right. No, completely agree. I mean, on those lines, we talk about MVP, and we have heard of that statement a lot. One thing, I mean, I was writing a journal, and I was just thinking that so many times in so many companies, right, MVP becomes like something wherein you can actually push the features you cannot develop under the carpet. Oh, it's an MVP. Oh, it's an MVP. What we forget about is that MVP is a process, right? So it's not just you release it and you forget about it. Oh, if you reached an MVP, great. It's testing your hypothesis. It's validating the problem. It's the
Yeah.
product market fit you talked about, right? So there's so many examples on those lines wherein, um, from a product management hat on, what's what's the little small step you can do to prove your hypothesis, to validate the product market fit, to validate the problem here, to identify the problem, for example, right?
Yeah.
And it's not like I have a great idea and that's it, and just build it. I just remember, Jeff, I was reading an article from Y Combinator, and around 42% of startups fail due to lack of product market fit. And that's where the consulting comes in, wherein, and when you talk about it, so when I go there and talk about, oh, you need to have a test and learn stream. You need to have you identified the problem. Okay, so what's the hypothesis you're testing? And it's strange, but quite often, not even wrong answers. You don't have any answers. You
Yeah.
don't
And
get any answers.
it comes back to those hypothesis and intuition and recognizing, is the problem that I'm addressing a real problem with scale? Do people actually see value in solving this problem? All those things that sometimes people get a little bit too narrow. And it's awesome. The passion in an entrepreneur comes from, it's a problem I'm personally experiencing. But then you have to take it outside of yourself and say, is it a problem that enough other people experience and enough other people see value in solving to build a business around?
Right. Right.
And that's where, some of that product market fit falls over. And
Yeah.
some of it falls over, quite frankly, in the mentality that was built over the past 2 decades in Silicon Valley around rapid failure. And
Hmm.
rapid failure has a really bad side, a dark side that I think, which is people who just are looking to make money.
Hmm.
And so they're just punting with ideas for a 6-month experiment to see if they can get some product market fit, and then dumping it and then going on to the next one, rather than really engaging with a long-term passionate commitment to something that they can see through.
Yeah.
And that's started to fall apart. That's not happening as much as it was 10 years ago, but 10 years ago, it was silly, the number of things that were just people focused on, oh, I think if I do this, I could make a lot of money and be the next big whatever, rather
Right.
than, this is a real problem I'm passionate about and want to solve and want to be a part of solving.
Right.
And that's important. And you talked about MVP, and I think, can't remember who it was that started the concept of an MLP, a minimal
Hmm.
lovable product.
Hmm.
But I think that brings in a really important component, that when you first put your product to market, you're not just proving, when you talk about viability, you're not just proving that it works,
Hmm.
you're proving that it engages
Right.
people. And
Right.
that's product market fit. So an
Right.
MVP potentially misses that engagement part, which is
Right.
what I think MLP brought in. What features do I need to make sure people see value in it
Right.
and love it,
Right.
or at
Right. Right.
least like it?
Right. No, I completely agree. I completely agree. It's like the perspective of how you look at it. Like I mentioned about, okay, put it under the carpet. Like you talk about MLP. So whatever that first product version is, it should actually tick hypothesis, product market fit. People should
Yeah.
actually uh, feel valued by the time they're spending consuming your product. They should see that value, and that engagement index, or they really feel engaged.
And here I'll offend a lot of people with this one. A lot of startups are technical founders, developers only, and they tend to make an MVP decision based on what's going to be easiest and quickest to finish developing and get to market, instead of saying, this one feature, this part is going to be really hard, but it's necessary to have a viable product. And that decision around the development complexity and ability to deliver sometimes takes on way too much weight in an MVP and leads to the failure for product market fit.
Yes, no, completely agree. Completely agree. If your MVP is not, or whatever version of the product is not producing that outcome, if it's not giving you any outcome of, oh, whether the product market fit was proved, or whether my hypothesis was proved, whether did I solve
Yeah.
the real problem, or did I just push it out because, well, and we thought about an MVP. Yes, we have released something. So
Yeah.
this perception and mindset is, and again, and to your point, I'm fighting that battle almost, I'll not say every day, but every week of,
Yeah.
all right, it's easy to implement. No, it's easy to implement. That's okay. But then if you do not, and there's so many, even third party validations, Jeff, wherein you go for a POC and, let's do this easy end to end thing. And then you get into years of commitment. you need to do the toughest thing,
Yeah.
right? To
And
prove.
sometimes the toughest thing is sometimes the developers don't have the right answer to the toughest thing.
Right,
Because sometimes the toughest thing is what I like to call squirrels.
right,
Squirrels is all the little people behind the scenes that are manually doing something that looks like it's part of the product and looks automated, but it's actually just being done by people digesting things and making it and throwing it back into the app to make it look like it was part of the product in the early days. And
right,
developers don't like that. They don't often see that of, oh, we don't have to solve this technically right now. We just need it to be solved, even if
right,
it means we have 12 interns sitting in a room faking it.
right,
And
right.
even like I worked for a company. I was a director on a company that had a payment product that had a partnership with the tollways in Queensland back several years ago. And when they first launched the OCR capability to read rego plates and confirm who to send the bill to for a toll when they didn't have a toll tag,
Hmm.
they had a room full of people checking what the OCR said the plate said and looking at the photograph to
Wow.
validate that the OCR got it right, and essentially teaching the OCR to be more accurate. And that didn't last forever. It lasted for a period of time enough to teach the OCR to be more accurate. But that
Right.
was a lot quicker than trying to develop a perfect OCR technically from the beginning. Squirrels had to help the OCR be better.
Right. No, yeah, I completely agree. I mean, that we're building a SaaS product, and I'll definitely come to you for the pricing. But from a product management approach, we're working with a dentist in Connecticut, and we're building this resource optimization or operational optimization tool, like a SaaS for dental clinics. Um, for the product market fit and validation, we built the whole flow, Jeff, in Google Sheets,
Yep.
and it got sold in $2,500 as well. Though the whole app is getting built, all the HIPAA compliance and everything is happening, but then we have, like you mentioned, a working prototype of the product which is running and working in a clinic.
Yeah.
So that's the validation. That is an MVP in true sense, because it's
Yeah.
proving a lot, right? So
And
yeah,
it goes back to a lot of traditional consulting methodologies to build a methodology that you can repetitively sell. The difference, I think, between consulting in the 1990s and what's happening with a lot of technology today is the genuine productization over time of the squirrels into code.
right, right, right.
And changing squirrels to code has been a threat to the consulting industry, because a lot of things they do, they have their formulas and their spreadsheets and their things they can apply and their methodologies they can apply. When you can start to replicate what those do with an app that I can just use myself without them, a lot of their value starts to evaporate.
Right, 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 right. And then that's where we come into picture, from more from a outcome based strategic consulting, which can lead the business to the
Yeah.
right direction and set the right frameworks. Like, you need to do problem identification, validation, feasibility scores, viability scores, desirability scores, whether the users even want it. Yes, identified the problem, but what's the score when you actually brought, like,
Yeah.
that Google sheet?
And,
They'll be
and
like,
more
it's crap.
and more importantly, how do you use that score? How do you use that data to combine with your intuition and your other observations to
Yes,
inform your decisions and
yes.
make quick decisions with confidence?
Yes, yes, completely agree, Jeff. So, coming back to a rapid fire, which is
Yeah,
becoming long
I
answers,
keep on
which is
slowing
great.
you
I'm
down.
loving this discussion, to be honest. Like, really, really lovely to talk to you, Jeff, and get a lot of wisdom. It'll really, really help the audience. Product managers, product marketing managers, entrepreneurs, people looking out for help in pricing or how to build a successful SaaS startup. So that's really awesome. So, Jeff, um, when you think of a person being successful, who first comes into your mind? So, who's your role model or who you look up to?
Yeah, that's a really hard question. I know you sent it to me ahead of time so I could think about it. I've always struggled with that answer because I admire bits and pieces of lots of people
Right.
from,
Okay.
and I think, for me, it's people who it's not somebody who's like out there in the market that I see on the news. It's people I've gotten to know deeply and personally, where I really can see the underlying mindset mentality of their success. And it's those people who have been a lot closer to me professionally and personally that I admire and I've used as models. And I had I had a managing director of the PR agency I worked for back in the early 1990s who shut down the business for a week. We lost a big client. We downsized from like 40 people to about 15 people. And he said, call all the clients that we have left, tell them we're not going to be available unless it's an emergency for 4 days. And we're going to go off site and we're going to rebuild this business and figure out how to do this.
Wow.
And that stuck with me forever. And you would have seen that I still, that's something I still practice at OneSaas. That mentality of I'm going to engage the people who are here and make them part of the solution
Hmm.
was so important. And what came out of that was we actually divided the business into three, and it ultimately became five and then seven profit centers of teams of 5 to 7 people that essentially were micro businesses within the
Wow.
business and had a lot more control and influence over managing their piece of the business. And even like when your team was overloaded and another team was slow, you would contract out, you would hire out somebody from the other team into your P&L, and it worked. It was all done in a very friendly and co-productive way, but it created an amazing atmosphere and turned the business around in months.
Amazing.
And that's that kind of, it's those moments in time when you see somebody do something admirable and you realize what sits behind that.
Right.
And as you get older, you realize that, what I saw back then when I was 24 or 25 when that happened. I saw somebody who was almost heroic in their engagement, and now I look back on it and go, that guy was scared shitless, but just knew how to do the right thing to react to his fear in a productive way.
Right.
I
Right.
didn't see that fear back then, but now when I'm older, I can look back and go, man, he was scared, but he knew how to stay calm and react and manage that fear and manage the fear of the team to produce an amazing turnaround and outcome.
Right. And that's what I've seen firsthand, I think, Jeff, when I was in OneSaas. And I think while talking to you through and through, we were always in touch. Um, um, the perseverance, right? The never say die attitude. Again, it's a cliche, but then literally I saw that wherein, you were, I saw you like really going through a roller coaster ride, but you're always kind of certain. And I think those learnings would have definitely helped you how to come out of these, situations.
Well, the cliche of fake it till you make it isn't quite right, but there's a lot of evidence that confidence
Hmm.
creates the right outcome. So being making decisions and then really believing in, committing to, and following through on those decisions is a way to demonstrate confidence and create the self-fulfilling prophecy of making that decision the right decision more often than not. And
Right.
I think that
No.
was something that as a whole team we were really good at OneSaas is we would present all of our different views. We would arrive at what we thought was the right decision, and then we would buckle down and commit to that decision and deliver.
Right. Right. I mean,
And
the close.
that wasn't a weeks long or a months long process. That was sometimes a 1 hour process on a very big decision,
Wow.
where we would come together, we would put it all on the table and say, "No, this feels like the right way to go. This is why. This is the evidence as to why. This is the strategic reason why. Boom, let's do it."
Yeah. No, I can completely relate to the frameworks which you produce about, what hypothesis what's the why of the product, first of all, right? So, which a lot of times is missing completely.
Yeah,
So that's where I think the companies I've worked with see value in regards to the consulting of if every so the product mindset, I would say, to from the core level, is that every single person in the company is aligned to the why. It's not instructional. It's not like, we'll not do it. And I never saw that in OneSaas, right?
why
So
are we
it's not
here?
like, it's not in scope. It's not my job. Instructional, that it's a task which is allocated to me. I'm doing it. It's more about why we are building it and what this integration will, solve for this platform users, for example. So if we get that alignment in the team, that product mindset, I think any team can achieve. Again, I mean, depends upon the product, but any most of the companies can achieve much more accelerated growth than they are achieving right now.
Yeah,
So
and
completely can align with you.
the team and
um,
the mindset is so much more important than anything else because, as you're pointing out, if you get the right team with the right mindset, overcoming challenges and finding the right direction is a lot easier.
right, and it can be consulted and coached. It can be
Absolutely,
inculcated in the team. Like
absolutely.
even in the companies I've worked full time in, I always kind of try to sit with the developers, and again, I mean, not just from a product management mindset point of view, but also from an empathetic point of view, also from uh, everyone should correlate, like you mentioned, transparency point of view, the person will actually do a lot more and be a lot more productive if and everyone in your team, the development team, the QA team, and everyone understands why they are building a product.
Yep.
So that's great. So one
I want to follow, I want to, before you go on to the next question, I want to follow that up to that point, making sure that everybody on the team is given that sense of worth and value in the team is so critical. And one of the things that I'm really, really proud of with OneSaas, and you would have seen this in your time working with us, is there is a big tendency in Australia to outsource some of your more menial functions to offshore teams in the Philippines.
Mhm, mhm.
And there's a tendency to treat those people as doers. Here's a list of tasks, do them. And it's because there's also a mentality in the BPOs, the business process outsourcing companies there, to set up people to be task oriented and just do what they're told and try to just tick the boxes. And we made a point of engaging those employees and giving them direct line of responsibility for things, making them part of the decisions, including them as those discussions. And we bucked the culture of the BPO we were working with to the point where I had to have regular discussions with with the managers there that they embraced. Thank God, we worked with a BPO that we thought would embrace us. They embraced, but we drove an entirely different team culture there that they had just never seen before because we trusted the team
Hmm.
and we entrusted them with responsibility for our business and made them part of it and inclusive. And that was something that was what we did with every employee in Sydney. So therefore, our mentality was, why wouldn't we do that with our employees in the Philippines? But it was very foreign to those BPOs in the Philippines to have that pushed on them. And so it was challenging, and I'm glad that we stuck with it because it produced. I wanted to read you. I got from one of our team in the Philippines after I left. So this just came in this week. A moment that made me cry because when you hear the feedback finally that what you
Right.
did was worth it, it's worth it. So this is, I'm not gonna name the person, but hi Jeff, just wanted to shoot you an email to thank you for everything you've done for the entire team and me. I have grown to love OneSaas because of the care and compassion that you have shown to everyone. Leadership and directives made us feel like a valuable part of the company. Our contributions were never left unseen and were rewarded generously.
Wow.
Like that
Wow.
to me is that's just like that to me that's that moment of, okay, we did something that was different than the status quo. It was hard, it was challenging, but it was right.
Right. Right. Right.
And it produces the kind of product team and the support for that product that you want in a company to drive success.
Right, right. I think the underlying, and would I be correct? I'm asking you, but then one of the most important aspects they say from a leadership point of view is empathy. And when I hear that and I correlate it to product management, empathy is paramount. You need to be empathetic with the users. You need to be, at the core, you need to be really empathetic because the products you are building would be consumed by your users, right? And when you are empathetic in that aspect, that empathy flows through with everyone. And that's where the envisioning, that's where the why comes in. That's where what you mentioned, that taking the team along, the relative importance, for example, is one of the other factors wherein people don't feel valued enough. And if they're not feeling valued enough, to your point, although they know the why, they'll not contribute. They will not contribute that much as they, that they can. So amazing, Jeff. I mean, I'm just getting goosebumps when I'm listening this, and you you would be feeling so proud of yourself, isn't it? Like such amazing feedback, such amazing outcome, right? You did absolutely. I mean, I remember those times. I remember those times when we talked about it. So
Yeah.
amazing outcome, amazing outcome.
And,
Again, congratulations.
thank you. And to your point about empathy, I am not an empath.
Okay.
And if you look at there's a lot of psychological profiles of the most successful leaders in the world, and they tend to lean more towards psychopathy than
All
empathy.
right. Okay.
Um, I do think it's a really important thing to be able to find your way to embrace empathy and recognize what the empathic decisions are without necessarily being a natural empath. And I'm
Mhm.
not saying I'm a psychopath, I'm saying that I'm not a natural empath, but it was a learned behavior for me over time that required a lot of personal reflection and a lot of mentoring to be able to recognize the empathic approach and the empathic decision and do things in an empathic way, even though it didn't come naturally to me. And over
Right.
time, the more you repeat something, the more it becomes natural. And I think I've become more empathetic and more of an empath over time because of that repetition and that constant reinforcement.
Yeah,
And
no, I can relate. Yeah,
that's
I can kind
important.
of. Yeah, sorry, Jeff.
That's important. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that is definitely. And I think if I correlate to it with this more than, I think maybe 15 years of experience in product management, maybe because you are in that cycle again and again and again and again and again and again. I feel that if you're not empathetic as a product manager, you cannot feel the pain of the users who will be consuming your product. You'll not be able to produce great results.
Yeah.
And it's applicable. It's like you'll see me saying that, what are you doing? How the user will be able to, how are you closing the loop? Oh, he'll be so confused. So that level of, for me, that aspect is really, really important from a product management point of view. And yes, you have definitely done a great job. And empathy is at a different level, which is reflective of the feedback you're receiving from everyone across the team. um, as a last thing, I mean, Jeff, if you could go back in your career or life and change one decision, what would it be?
I'll give you a high level answer and then a specific one. Before you're tied down by the various things of life, like marriage and children and things like that, take more risks. And I do think that we have a generation now that's a lot more open to taking risks and being less risk adverse. But there's a lot of opportunity I had to take bigger risks when I was younger, and I took a more conservative approach of no, I'm not ready to take on those risks. I'm not, whatever. And then as you get older, you go through a phase where it's really hard to take some risks because you have a lot of people depending on you. And then hopefully you get to the point where you can create some financial freedom where you can start to take those risks again. And recognizing that that's kind of a standard future pattern is really important. But I think back on the risk that I didn't take as kind of one of those things that everybody has a story like this. But in the early to mid 1990s, a coworker of mine went to work for a small company in San Francisco called Yahoo, and then invited me into their friends and family IPO, which at that point I didn't know anything about shares or equity. I didn't even know what an IPO was. I'd never heard of the concept of friends and family. And he's saying, "Do you want to put $2,000 in to buy 2,000 shares of this company called Yahoo? And it might go somewhere someday. And this is what's happening. And this is all like he was down in Silicon Valley, where it's all happening. I'm in Chicago, going, you got a company called Yahoo, and you want me to put money behind it and do something that I've never been comfortable doing. And by by the year 2000, my $2,000 would have been worth about $7 million.
Wow.
And
So,
I
guys,
did,
there are better opportunities than Bitcoin,
and
which
I
people
did.
have lost.
$2,000 was a lot of money to me at that time. It was like everything I could scrape together if I were to do it. It was a huge risk. But I think sometimes you need to step back and go, is this a risk that's worth taking? What's the downside? What's the upside? And take some big risks when you're young. And the downside is, so what? I have no savings anymore. Who cares? I'm young and I have no responsibility. So yeah, to my younger self, I would say, be less risk adverse. Go do big things. Do bigger things when you're younger.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. I can go back to the startup I launched right after Cirrus in 2016 in real estate, about properties.com.au. And with just a team built on equity, we could do a strategic partnership with one of the biggest mortgage brokers at that point in time. So we were doing everything right. But to your point, I could only sustain for like 5 months, and then it started. The sustainability started becoming a question mark, not for just me, but for other founders as well. I would admit I could have sold my house. Yeah, I did own a house, so I could have sold the house, but I did not. And eventually, that strategic partner was acquired by realestate.com.au.
Awesome.
So we would have been bigger, but again, I mean, I can completely relate to what you're saying. And I would say, uh, I would say, even if you have dependencies, there are so many opportunities out there, at least in this time and era, wherein you can easily figure out a cash cow.
Yeah.
Again, Amazon selling real estate, whatever becomes a cash cow, which can let you free up from your 9 to 5, right? And then you can really take those risks, to build something great.
Yeah. In the
That
very
is
early,
a that is an sorry.
in the very early days of eBay, my cash cow when I was doing my first web development company was to drive around every Saturday morning to every garage sale and recognize what sold well on this new eBay thing, buy it for cheap and sell it on eBay. And I was making
Wow.
$2,000 a month. That was paying my rent.
Wow. Wow.
And it was a
Amazing.
lot of work, and it was, it was early days. It became a little bit harder over time, but yeah, there's always a way. If you're a smart, creative person who can find a way, there's always a way to survive. And
Yes.
again, that comes back to that: when you're in the early days of a startup, you have to make sure you have your survival plan, and and
Yes.
and know how far you're willing to go to survive. And not everybody's going to be comfortable saying, "I want to commit to this for another couple of years, so I'm going to sell my house."
Yes. Yes.
But
Yes.
you asked me who I admire. I admire my son because he actually helped me make that decision. I think you've met Josh.
Wow.
I was sitting pretty upset on the couch on the day when I was like, okay, and when I had a job offer in front of me, and it was not a job I was excited about, but it paid pretty well. And if I had taken it, I would have had to walk away from OneSaas. I would have been able to keep my house. And he was like, "What's wrong, Dad?" And I kind of talked him through what was going through my head. And he said, "It's just a house. Whatever. Sell the house.
Wow.
You love what you're doing at OneSaas. Stick with it. We'll go rent a house. Who cares?" And he literally was just so dismissive of this overly inflated value we put on owning a house, as you're making it more important than it is. And he reminded me how much I hated one of my previous jobs where I didn't wasn't passionate about the job, but it made good money. And I didn't like going to work every day. And he reminded me how much I love going to work every day. And that,
Amazing.
that's
So
those kind of moments make a difference.
he's the unsung hero, right, of OneSaas.
What's that?
I'm saying he's the unsung hero of OneSaas who actually push you to be there and make it a success, isn't it?
There's a
Thanks,
lot of
Matt.
there's a lot of unsung and fully sung heroes at OneSaas. It was truly a team effort that involved not just the employees but their families and
Yes. Yeah.
the people in their lives, because they had to do something that meant their partners and people around them needed to be supportive of it.
Yes.
And it's
Yes.
that support net that's important.
No, completely agree. So
Everybody,
any,
yeah.
sorry,
Sorry, go
no,
ahead.
sorry, Jeff. Sorry.
I was going to say anybody who's being an entrepreneur needs to make sure the people around them are on board for the journey and support them through it, and that they include them in the decisions they're making.
Right. Oh, completely agree. Completely agree.
Going through a divorce while you're building a company wouldn't be a great idea. And I know people who've done that, and it hasn't been a happy path.
Right. So, Jeff, any last comments, any last advice, anything you want to say which can help um, the budding product managers or entrepreneurs or anyone that one thing, if they remember, will help them in traversing the journey?
Humility, just humility. I mean, we used to joke at OneSaas that my primary job was to make sure that we never ran out of coffee, and that was a combination of both. Just they're making the point to the entire team that there was no task that was too menial, no matter how much experience you had. Like, everybody had to do everything to keep the company afloat, but also acknowledging that in a leadership role, you can't take that "I have minions" kind of approach. You need to have that humility of everybody's here to contribute value and everybody's critically important. And sometimes the best thing I can do is to make sure all those people have the tools they need to do their job really well. And sometimes that was just making sure there's coffee. Damage. How many companies could say that their productivity would sink if everybody came in the morning and there was no coffee?
Right,
Even if it
right.
was just a lost half hour while everybody went out to buy coffee.
Right. Right. No, guys, I mean, what Jeff is saying, I'll tell you an example, and obviously, Jeff can relate to it. I was sitting in the meeting room back in 2019, I think September, October, and I just saw Jeff coming in with blue colored mats, if I remember. And he said, "Oh, get off. And, Raj, can you go in another room and, do whatever you're doing?" And I'm like, what he's trying to do. And literally, Jeff removed um, the old mats, and fixed the room with the new mats. And the CEO and founder of a company doing it, I mean, hats off. I mean, that's
It was
humility in true
that was a
sense.
therapy afternoon. I needed to do something physical to focus my head because I was going through something in my personal life, and recarpeting that room was an awesome bit of therapy.
Right, you're downplaying it, but yeah, I mean, that's humility at its best. I mean, no one can even imagine, and that's where, that's how you become, so successful. So thanks a lot, Jeff. I mean, I really appreciate, coming, to the conversation. And I completely I'm confident that a lot of people will learn a lot, and it'll help them traverse through, or come out of the situations. um uh, you know Learning about how you came out of your struggles, what you did. And again, I mean, the learnings on how to build a team, how to build a passionate team, how to envision, how to be empathetic. uh, Thanks a lot. I mean, thank you very, very much.
It's always fun to talk to you, and loved it. And yeah, just remind me. I'll finish with one last little story. I attended a e-commerce conference like 15 or 20 years ago, and there was a heckler heckling the guy up on stage. The guy up on stage was purporting to be an expert on e-commerce, and the heckler said, "What makes you an expert?" And the guy responded without blinking an eye, without even taking a breath, "I know one thing that you don't know, and therefore, if you shut up and listen, you might learn something today." And that's, to me, that was what made magic in our team, is everybody on our team knew something that other people didn't know. And if we all listened, we all learned from each other, and we were a better team. Everybody was an expert at something. And just
Great,
finding and recognizing that expertise was a big part of that humility and the right team mindset to drive success.
great, great, great. Thanks, Jeff. Thank you. Thanks a lot again. And I would say, to everyone who is listening to it, feel free to follow me on Rajan Sharma, break out of your cocoon. Jeff, you have any handler, you can mention that. Connect with Jeff Perlman on LinkedIn if you want to ask any specific questions. Uh, and
Follow
again, I
Revenue
mean,
Ninja on LinkedIn.
sorry,
Follow Revenue Ninja on
follow
LinkedIn.
Revenue Ninja on
I've,
LinkedIn, definitely.
I've only just tweaked getting a page up, but building up some followers and starting to put some content on there is in my next phase.
Sure,
So,
sure, sure. And whoever wants to become a product manager or is a product manager and struggling, I'm always there. So just go to my LinkedIn profile, just hit the trust calls, just book a time, and you can talk to me. I often get a question: Is it charged? Is it charged? It's not. So you can feel free to book a time and talk to me. That's great. That's great. Thanks, Jeff.
thanks, Raj. Cheers.
Thank you.